like the Red Sea. Right, you can beat your head against the windshield, you can yell, scream, whatever, taken care of that. They just
Good evening. How are you?
Hello, good. How are you?
Good. I guess we'll give it another minute or two to see if folks are going to come in.
There's two that I know are going to come on, and one I just emailed her the email. For some reason, she didn't have it.
Okay, awesome. Because I think Willa said, hello, good evening.
Hello, hi.
I think Willa said there were originally 12 and now maybe 10 for tonight or something like that. So we'll see. We shall see. So I'll give it like, it's just now 6:30. I'll give it to 6:32 because start on time and then we'll end on time.
Sounds good.
Absolutely. So anyway, so it certainly doesn't, my computer is telling me it's 64 degrees. It does not feel like 64 degrees. I mean, I have a little bit of a head cold that might be part of it, but it just does not feel like 64 degrees today.
Well, it was warmer than that earlier. I think that sometimes it just feels chilly because the temperature is changing so much. You
Yeah.
know, it's just so volatile.
It definitely is. It definitely is.
Sure.
A little bit nuts. So trying to figure out, it's that layering weather where you just got to wear layers because you just don't know what it's going to be morning, noon, or night at all.
That's for sure.
Hello.
Hi.
Hi, this is Vivian. I'm not feeling too good. I'm feeling a little bit under the weather, so I'm gonna have my camera off.
Diana, you've got all those guitars in the background. Do you play?
I hear. My camera.
I don't. My husband plays. He wants me to play, and I'm one of those people that when I take to something, I don't put it down, and I don't want to discourage him because I know I'll learn a song and then he's gonna get discouraged. So I haven't picked it up.
I
'Cause I don't-
let my husband
my
play
son's
too.
like, that's the dumbest reason I've ever heard. I'm like, no, you don't know your dad. So yeah, I haven't yet.
Yeah, it's funny. I noticed the guitars when you logged in, and I have the guitar up in my home office. I'm sitting in the dining room today because I just am. And I got it years ago and I thought, oh, this will be good. I'll learn how, I could learn on my own time. When I say I've had that guitar for probably 2 decades now, and I've never taken a lesson, it's just sitting, occasionally I dust it off, so it doesn't get dusty. It's just sitting in the office. I was like, one day, maybe, who knows?
When you're
Yeah.
ready, it's there.
Yeah, exactly. Exactly. Oh, here's another person popping in.
Hey. Hi, T. She's connecting.
Yeah, it looks like audio is still connecting for her. I have to remember to look at the top of the screen for the admit button. The last time I did this, I'm used to just people showing up in Zoom. And so I completely forgot that I had to admit people. And there were like 12 people in the waiting room. And I was like, oh, my bad. Sorry, didn't know you were there. Because with work, we're all in the same system. So we don't really have a waiting room. People just show up, but it's like, oh, that dang waiting room. Looks like Tanisha.
Hi, Elizabeth.
She looks like she's still.
Hi, how are you?
Hello.
Good. I'm sorry I didn't call yet. I'll call you later.
Okay.
Thank you. I'm bad. I had some stuff come up.
Somebody just drove by beeping like crazy for some reason. I don't know why. Oh, no, that's what we've got here. That's me. I'm the 6th person. I'm like, I only see 5 people here. No, I would be the 6th person. Okay, it's amazing what head cold medicine does for you. Logic kind of goes out the window sometimes.
Oh.
Looks like she's still trying to connect with audio. Well, it's 6:35, and so I'm sure when she gets connected, oh, just got a check mark. Tanisha, can you hear us?
Yes.
Okay, awesome. All righty. Well, we're going to get started, and I will try to keep an eye on where the little admit button pops up. And so if anyone else joins later, they can certainly join in. So good evening. My name is Deneen Bennett, and I am going to be facilitating the salary negotiation class. I've done this class, I don't know how many times for Dress for Success. And I find that it only works best when people participate and ask questions. So I'm hoping that the goal tonight is people will get engaged. And it looks like we're gonna have a small group, which makes it even better because you can't really hide. So that way we can all just talk and chat and have a good time. And as I said, you know, we'll start on time. The class doesn't really run 90 minutes, but I don't even know what I'm calling the class. Our get together doesn't really run for 90 minutes, but certainly there's time that if you have questions, I'd be happy to answer them. Will be happy to introduce myself, but I'd love to learn a little bit about who's here and sort of why you decided to participate with Dress for Success Northern New Jersey. I think, Diane, you were the first on. So why don't you tell me a little bit about yourself, what you're looking for, what you're hoping to get out of the class tonight, anything you'd like to share.
Okay, well, my name is Diana Ortiz, and I was a paralegal for 25 years, and COVID came and changed that, right, for everybody. So it changed that for me as well. I had a lull of work, and so when I went back, I went in as an executive assistant, and that didn't necessarily pan out. But when I put my information on LinkedIn, I started noticing just the salaries and the effort that I put in as a paralegal. I started to rethink what I was doing, the trajectory of what's left of my career. And so the reason for me being at Dress for Success was thankfully Vivian invited me. And I was so grateful because I really needed something like this because I felt I lost my mojo. So I'm hoping that with Dress for Success, I get that back and I can go back into the workplace and see where I'm going to end up.
Awesome. Thank you. Thank you for that. Is it Edie? Edie, I think you popped in next.
Yes, it's Edie. Am I muted still? No.
Nope, you're good.
I'm tuning in because I'm a coach and I like to hear what all of the members are learning, and so that when I start working with one or more of them, that I know where they've come and where we can pick up and move forward. Just by way of explanation, I have a long career in mostly in finance, in public finance. As a credit official, I was executive director of a state agency for 9 years and an investment banker before that.
Awesome. Thank you. I think Vivian, you popped in, or maybe it doesn't matter at this point. Vivian, would you like to share about who you are and what you're looking for?
Yes. Hi, everybody. My name is Vivian Rodriguez. I come from the corporate pharmaceutical world. In 2015, I got laid off. Sorry. I got laid off from Bayer. And I decided to take, 5 years off to be a stay-at-home mom. Did that. It worked out great. Don't regret it. Had a great time with my kiddos. And I'm working at a district school right now, but I want to get back into the pharmaceutical world, corporate industry. Again, I miss the personal development that that they give you, the trainings, and I just feel like with Diana, I'm doing something totally different. In the school districts, it's the administrative assistants, they're called secretaries, which is okay, no big deal. But I'm not being challenged, and I feel like I'm losing what I've learned in the corporate world. I feel that I'm losing what I know and what I like to do. So I want to get back into that into that field, and excited that my friend told me about Dress for Success. Going to the Saturday classes with Coach Willa, and I'm excited for what's going to happen, the doors that will be opened with a new opportunity that Dress for Success is giving us. So I'm definitely excited for that.
Okay. Elizabeth, do you want to go next? Thank you for that, Vivian.
Thank you. You're welcome.
I am Elizabeth Castano. My background is in nursing. I work in nursing for a few years, but then I moved over to the pharmaceutical world and I've been there for about 18 years. I've been in the drug safety department within pharmaceuticals for the last 7 years, but I'm stuck. I've been taking more responsibilities but not getting anywhere where I'm at. So I'm ready to take a next step to hopefully get into the management position and of course a better salary.
Mhm.
Because
Okay,
where I'm at, I'm stuck. I'm not going anywhere.
awesome. All righty. Thank you for that. Tanisha, are you back with us?
Maybe she's having issues because I
Yeah.
think she wrote
You
down.
put her on the chat.
Yeah,
may
I
have
see
a
her in
problem
the
with
chat.
audio.
Yeah, and that's fine. So Tanisha wants to transition into HR, focus on diversity and inclusion. Are you sure? Okay. That's good times. And we can certainly talk about that. So I'll give you just a snippet of who I am, where I am. I come to this session tonight because 1,000 years ago, probably 15 years ago, 20 years ago, I don't even remember anymore, but I found out about Dress for Success because I was working in the luxury retail industry. And with that came a clothing allowance. So I was quickly like overwhelming my closet and I needed some place to donate clothes. And my function, my history has been in human resources. And so I spent probably, I don't know, 20 something years, maybe, I guess, in luxury retail. I was working at Madison Square Garden for about 6 years, which was a lot of fun. And then I did some consulting for about 5 years. I'm a certified executive coach. Currently, I work for Oakview Group, which is a sports and entertainment and venue management organization. So if you're familiar with UBS, we are, partial owners of that. There are probably 200 plus different buildings, venues, accounts that we have around the country, including Moody Center in Austin and Climate Pledge out in Seattle. Tanisha, I guess your volume's coming through. We can hear you. And so right now, Oakview Group is an interesting organization because although the company itself is about 7 years old, the HR function is just coming up on 2 years old. I joined the company last April. And so my responsibilities, I oversee the talent acquisition, talent management, performance management, internship programs, the coaching function, and basically anything else my chief people officer throws my way. So good times, a lot of fun there, a lot of stories from over the years. And certainly with all of my years in HR, a lot of, opportunity to have conversations about salary, make some observations, all of that good stuff. And it's an interesting time now in the market because, pre-COVID, we were kind of cruising on. I think people had an expectation around understanding how to figure out what companies were structuring their salary and their compensation around. And then COVID hit and the world imploded. And aside from trying to stay alive, we were all also trying to figure out what are our jobs? How are they changing? Are we still going to have jobs? What does that look like? Can we work from home? And it's funny because you read a lot of the articles about people wanting to work from home. In my current company, I will say so many people were just constantly fighting to get back to the office. Again, it's sports and entertainment, it's venue management. These are folks who work in buildings. These are very, sometimes unfortunately, extroverted people. So they miss being in the office together. They miss that level of communication and camaraderie. So they were very excited to come back to the office. Myself, I could work from home forever. Part of that is because my commute is about an hour and a half each way. But you know, there are many people who were very excited about being in the office. But companies had to struggle with that. You know, there were so many issues with COVID and people working from home. And then all of a sudden we're finding out that people weren't actually home. They were in Bora Bora because they had really great Wi-Fi connections. And we were like, oh my God, what does that mean for taxing? You know, I mean, it became like a bailiwick of what do we do now while we try to protect our employees, protect mental health, protect the organization, keep the business running, all that kind of stuff. So, and with that, compensation conversations changed because a lot of people started to say, I like working from home and I want to stay here and I don't want to come back to the office. And even with my personal CEO, you know, he has a philosophy that we are in the business of bringing people together for sports and entertainment, and therefore we can't be a work from home environment. Trust and believe, we've got a large population of people who are working from home regularly because that's the way we're going to get people and hire people. I don't know if his philosophy has changed or he's just given up on that rhetoric. I haven't heard him say it yet, but that's just the way of the world for now. And, you know, one of the things we're seeing in the marketplace certainly is that people have been asking for outrageous salaries, and there's been a little bit of a fear factor, and companies have been paying it. And, you know, the pendulum's going to swing the opposite way sooner or later. That's not going to ride forever. But, you know, for now, it's a very interesting place to be. So, you know, with that, I encourage you to ask questions along the way. You know, I'm not one of these leave it to the end kind of people. So just, you know, if you're muted, unmute yourself, ask a question. I am going to share my screen. There is a PowerPoint that goes along with this. Let me find you again because I have 29 different things open. I don't think you need to see my Teams chat. All right, let's see if this works. Diana, can you see this, the PowerPoint? You can just give me a thumbs up. Okay, good, awesome. So, so we are going to be talking about salary negotiations and all of the components and pieces. Let's see. Oh, Tanisha's back. Hold on. We're going to talk about salary negotiation and all the pieces and parts that go along with that. So just some facts that are out there in the marketplace around getting money, and especially for women, because I will say in general, what I've seen in my 1,000 years of working in HR is that women historically did not ask for the raise, or they did not negotiate their salary. You know, women tended to have the mindset of, if I work really hard, it'll be noticed and I'll get that promotion, I'll get that raise. Or, you know, I'm going to take the offer that they're giving me, and once I get in, they'll see that I'm worth X amount of percentage more and I'll get promoted or I'll get a salary increase or whatever. Whereas men, and, you know, exaggerating a little bit, but not really, you know, will show up at the door and be like, look, I don't know what this job is, and I'm not even sure I'm qualified for it, but if you hire me and pay me this other amount of money, I'm going to figure it out and I'm going to be amazing for you. And you're like, okay. And they negotiate right out the gate. And I've even had experiences of men going into their supervisors and saying things like, my wife is pregnant, I'm the breadwinner, I need more money because we have another mouth to feed. And the supervisor's like, oh, I can understand that. And this actually happened in one HR department I was working in, and this particular male person, who wasn't even really good, got a $10,000 salary increase because they were having their third child. And I walked into the head of HR, because, you know, rumor mill is amazing, found out about that, dug in, found out that he got the $10,000 processed to his salary out of scope for our timing for increases. And I walked into the head of HR, who I had a fairly good relationship with, and I said, you know what? I have one dog, but I'm thinking of adopting a second one, and they're expensive, and I need a salary increase because, you know, those vet bills are a bitch, you know. And he looked at me and he was like, Denise, what the hell are you doing in my office? And I'm like, look, we all know about this guy's salary increase. This is crap. And he was just like, well, you know, I mean, he's responsible for his family. And I was like, and I'm responsible for me, you know? But there is that sort of paternalistic mindset of the man is the breadwinner. And therefore, you know, when he presents an argument like that, it should make sense. Meanwhile, there's still that mentality, and Chief, which is an organization that of women executives, published an article not too long ago that the title of it was the cost of, what was it? The cost of the mommy tax. And basically they did research that showed that men make more than women, duh. And then women with no children make more than women with children. And the research that came out of that was because there's still that subconscious mindset of, we're not going to invest in women with children because they're going to put their family first. They're going to be responsive to their family needs. They're not going to be able to work the long nights and weekends. And if they're still of childbearing age, they may leave us to go have a child. And so, you know, everybody knows that men make more than women, but to slice and dice it and see that women with children make less than women without children is both interesting and sad at the same time. So, you know, that just means that we as women have to advocate for ourselves. And, you know, what's further interesting, you know, in this little nugget of research is that while women are now trying to negotiate and ask for money, they're still not getting it, you know? So, you know, we're teaching women how to negotiate. We're teaching women that it's not personal when you go in and say, I need 12% more than you're offering me, or I just landed a major project and I need a bump in my position or whatever. We now need to figure out how we change the mindset in corporate America, because now that we're training women how to do it, they're still not getting it to the level that they should be, or at least the same level as equal or on par with men. So, you know, some of the challenges women have include, and this is not just in the workplace, but, you know, women have been taught to shy away from having bold behavior. So much so, even taught to shy away from wearing bold colors, bold jewelry, you know, bold accessories. We're just taught not to be bold in the workplace. Women tend to not get recognized for opportunities to negotiate. There's just an assumption, and I think the assumption also goes along with women's thinking that we want to be liked. And if we try to go in and negotiate and ask what we want, they may not like us. Where men know it's not about like or dislike. It's about, this is what I need. You know, it's not about how you feel about me. It's about, I'm going to advocate for what I want. Women tend to go in and think about, I don't want to start off on the wrong foot. I don't want to be seen as aggressive. So women tend to negotiate less. You know, we as women, somebody's trying to enter. Hold on. I have to move my little light ring to admit them. You know, we tend to focus on what we can offer the employer versus what the employer can provide us. And I see that in so many ways in the interview process, because women will show up and say, well, I can do these 49 bullets you have on this job description. This fifth one though, like, do you have some support or training around that? Because I'm really not sure. I haven't done that a lot. Where men will come in and be like, look, I know sales. I whatever this is, I know sales. So let's talk about what I need from you. And you're just like, okay. You know, there's a very different perspective and focus when it comes to how women view conversations with potential employers versus how men view those employers. women also tend to talk about what they've done in the past from, I don't want to say a negative place, but they tend to talk about, they tend to bring personal information to the conversation. Like they will interject into the conversation things like, well, now that my children are at an age where they can, go home, I don't have a problem working late. Or they'll say, well, I had this experience in the past, and the reason I'm leaving that job is because I just had a challenge with my boss, and he was just really disrespectful and he hurt my feeling. The new employer doesn't want to hear all that, right? So focus on what you can do for the new employer. Stop talking about all of your history, all of your challenges, all of that stuff, right? Accepting the first offer. If you leave with nothing else tonight, if I even almost sense that you have an opportunity for a new job and you take it without negotiating, I will find you, hunt you down, and like slap your hand. Never accept the first offer. And we'll talk about why and how compensation is structured a little later. Failing to do their homework. Again, this is a huge miss where women are not doing their research around the company, the industry, the job, the level, plus what they need, not actually costing out what they need. And we'll take a look at that as well in a minute.
So,
Yeah,
can
go
I
ahead.
interrupt
Yeah,
to ask a
absolutely.
question? Just to get the conversation going a little bit. So what is the best way of finding out how much other people are paid for the job that you hope to be offered?
So awesome question. And we're going to cover that in a slide or two. So if you can hold on that. I will say, however, one of the things that is keeping HR people up at night right now is California. And, gotta love California. And at the same time, as an HR person, I really kind of want it to fall off into the ocean. But California just recently passed, Governor Newsom put a bill, and it recently passed, it's Bill 1163, I believe the number is, which gives employees in California the right to ask what people in similar roles in their company are getting paid. Now, as with all of these bills that show up, HR is like, oh my God, what does that mean, right? Because rare is it that companies these days only have employees in one location, right? So in my company, for example, well, we've got 3 corporate offices now, but the main corporate office is in California. So we've got a number of employees there. So, we're first asking the question, what does that mean? Because again, keep in mind, I told you, we just had HR start in this company last year. So we're still trying to figure out where the bodies are buried and what people are getting made and what the philosophy is. Like, we don't even have a compensation person yet. And so with this law coming on board, one of the concerns is that because we have employees in California who can now ask these questions, what does that mean for all the other employees in the company everywhere else? Does that mean if we have a staff accountant in California, they can ask what other staff accountants in California get paid? Or can they ask what staff accountants across the country get paid, right? So and vice versa, right? Because we have a corporate office in California, does that now mean that employees in Idaho, because the law passed in California, can raise their hand and say, I'm a staff accountant in California. What are staff accountants in California? I'm a staff accountant in Idaho. What are staff accountants in California getting paid? Right? It's a mess. And so, of course, lawyers and HR folks are losing their minds over this. But California, while this sounds very dramatic, California is not the only state that has laws that affect employees this way. So, for example, Colorado, if a company has employees in Colorado, that doesn't mean they necessarily have an office in Colorado or a corporate headquarters in Colorado. They can have an employee working remotely in Colorado, one employee. That means that you now then must post salary and benefit information on job descriptions if that employee in Colorado could view that job that you're posting as a promotion or in their department, and therefore they need to know about it. So one employee in Colorado can change the entire posting process that a company that is based in New York has. I experienced that during COVID because I was working with a New York-based nonprofit, and we had one employee pick up and relocate to their parents' home in Colorado. Completely changed our posting process. So there are a lot of ways to find out about salary. There are certainly websites that I'll share later on in the presentation. But also knowing the law is very helpful. So if you're looking at jobs and they have offices in California, I venture to guess that you're going to see a lot more disclosure around salaries in the job postings as we move forward. So that's definitely coming down the pike. That law goes into effect January 1st. Any other questions? And by the way, when I say any other question, that gives me an opportunity to take a drink. Okay, moving on. So what we're going to talk about tonight is identifying what's important to you, because I think probably what is ignored the most and what is most important is first thinking about what's important to you before you even almost think about interviewing for a new job and then starting the negotiation. And then what is total compensation and what the salary negotiation dance looks like during the pandemic or not, because allegedly we're not in a pandemic anymore, allegedly. So what that means to you is what it means to you. I still wear my mask. So one thing to think about is what's important to you in an employer. And this is a pretty little chart, and I encourage you to make a pretty little chart like this for yourself when you're thinking about what you are looking for in an employer. So, location and commute. And what does that mean for you, right? Like you may say, oh, I don't mind an hour commute. But do you really, if you've got a 5-year-old and all of a sudden you get a call from school saying little Susie is throwing up and now you need to get home and you're taking public transportation and your bus doesn't come for another half an hour? Do you really think that all the way through about, I don't mind the commute, right? Company reputation. There are a number of ways to slice and dice that. Most people would say, yeah, I'd love to work for a company that has a great reputation. I would have argued probably 10 years ago, Walmart would have been a great place to work as a woman because they had so many dang gender discrimination lawsuits. They were looking for women to hire to show that they didn't hate women. Now, what the actual culture inside looked like, well, you might have had to do some digging to find that out, but they were certainly looking for women when they were trying to defend themselves against those gender discrimination lawsuits. So that would have been a company that I definitely would have looked into. Culture and work environment, very big. You want to know if you fit, right? You want to know if you're going to be comfortable. Being a woman can be challenging in certain environments. If you have a neurodiversity, that can be challenging in certain environments. If you're part of the LGBTQ plus community, that can be challenging in certain environments. You want to think about the culture and the work environment that you're joining. The leadership team. I teach at Fairleigh Dickinson, and we actually have an assignment coming up in a week or two where my students have to look into workplace culture and they have to research a company and they have to dig in and find out everything they can find out about the culture of that company. And I always give them the example of places like Amazon and Tesla, right? I say to them, what do you think about those companies? And they go, oh my gosh, innovative, creative, exciting, cutting edge. And I'm like, what do you know about the leaders? Well, they're brilliant. Really? Yes. And what else do you know about the leaders? Because Elon Musk is a hot mess. When you dig into Tesla, you will find out that their their You know what it is. I'm on NyQuil. Where they're building cars, let's just say that. Their factory setting, I think they have one in California. The local hospital contacted the state because they had so many workplace accidents happening in that factory because Elon Musk was requiring them to run 24/7 to meet supply demands. That's not a leader I want to work for, right? You know, when you look at Amazon, yeah, you've got somebody who makes what, $2-3 billion an hour as the CEO. And yet when the pandemic hit, what did he do for his people? Did he take 1 or 2 or 3 hours of his income and say to his employees, I know you got to stay home with your kids, school's closed, here's some money to help you through, you hourly workers in a fulfillment center? No. Amazon set up a GoFundMe so people like you and I could contribute to it to help their employees. That's not a culture I want to work for, right? So looking at the culture and looking at who's in charge of these companies, you know, that to me is important. May not be to you, but at least you need to make that decision whether it's important or not, right? Of course, benefits and compensation, strategically not put at the top because everybody thinks of that anyway, so no point in putting it at the top. And we'll talk more about that later. Career development and potential for growth. And I especially pick on this one when I do this session for Dress for Success, because we're all at different places and stages in our lives and in our careers. And not everybody is in growth mode, right? Some of us just want a good job. Some of us just want a good job where we just want to work 8, maybe 9 hours a day, where we got good benefits, we get to go home and have a life, right? Me personally, I truly pray at night that the job I'm in is the last job I have. I want to retire. I'm not trying to think about my next role, you know? So we need to think about that and think about it from the perspective of the culture as well. Because if the culture looks at employees who are not trying to grow, and that's not part of their value system, that could be a strike against you. Right? So identify where you are in your life. If you want to grow and get promoted and keep working, fantastic. But also be honest with yourself and say, look, I want a good job and a good company around good people, get my 3-4% increase each year. Maybe if I get promoted, okay, fine, I'll do it. But I'm not looking for that. You got to be honest about that, because that's going to influence how you look at companies and how you negotiate salaries. And then, of course, finally, salaries. Any questions on any of that?
Wow.
Hey, Tanisha, I finally see your face.
I'm sorry, I was having a little difficulty.
That's okay.
Boy, I missed you. You made me spark some things that you said the last time when we were actually meeting face to face when I was in the cohort.
Mm-hmm.
Well, yeah, a lot. That's a lot, because I know from my last role, I didn't think about any of these things that you said.
Mm-hmm.
But it's a lot to think about. I'm thinking about them now, and I'm passionate about it now. Do I fit into the culture of the company? What are their values? That's a lot. I mean, and now what you just said now, like as far as working, because I turned 50 this year. And
yay! It's only getting better.
yes, it is. And looking forward, because I'm not married, I don't have children, and you know, I'm gonna be working a long time.
Mm-hmm.
So I mean, unless I don't know what's gonna happen, but I know I'm gonna be working a long time until I decide that I'm retiring and I'm pulling out. So
yeah. And you know what I would say to you too, because you put in the chat that you want to transition into HR and DEI, and girl, we can talk about that offline because that's a hot mess these days. But you know, especially when it comes down to culture and work environment and leadership, I will say, were there companies doing DEI work pre-George Floyd? Of course there were, right? George Floyd was the catalyst for so much. And when that happened, I remember talking to an HR friend of mine and I said, you just watch. All of a sudden, we're going to go on LinkedIn and we're going to see everybody and their mother posting and saying, I'm so happy to announce I'm now the head of DEI. I'm now the vice president of DEI. I'm now the senior vice president of DEI. And I said, I'm almost tempted to make a chart and track them. I said, because I guarantee these people are going to be out of these jobs in 2 to 3 years, because these companies had a knee-jerk reaction to go and put DEI in place in their company because they wanted to be progressive, because, you know, killing Black people is bad, right? And then what they probably did not do was put funding and staffing behind it. They probably did not have cultural change initiatives within the organization. They hired a person and put them out on LinkedIn and said, we now have somebody focused on DEI, right? And so what I've watched over the last 2 years or so, these folks are changing jobs, because what that says to me was they were not supported in that culture. So, you know, that's why I say it is important, even if you're in finance, even if you're an administrative assistant, it is important to know what kind of culture you're walking into, right? Because otherwise you might get there, look around and go, oh my God, like, I don't want to be here, you know?
Right.
And by the way, if you walk in there and find out, oh my God, I don't want to be here, leave. Nobody's going to hold it against you. I made that mistake, and I will tell you, I joined a company, and I'll tell you because I still hold hate against, well, hate is too strong. I still just am very saddened by the culture of that company. I work for Michael Kors. I was there for 3 years. And I tell you, I was hired to be the director of learning and development, to develop a learning development department, put in training, leadership training, blah, blah, blah. I left there 3 years later, 15 pounds heavier, migraines coming back on, with like sleep anxiety and starting on an ulcer. Talk about a toxic culture. But I stayed, even though I recognized it within the first month or two that I was there, I stayed because I was like, it's okay. I'm going to fix this. I'm going to find my way. I'm going to make this make sense, because, you know, I'm a fixer. So if I could just line things up appropriately, it's going to be okay. It wasn't okay. It took me 3 years, 15 pounds and migraines to leave that place. Because at my age, I was like, okay, my body is shutting down. The next thing that's going to happen, I'm going to have a heart attack or stroke. I'm not 20. I can't bounce back easily, you know? So culture is key. So that's really something to think about, as important as what is the job and how much am I getting paid, right? Culture is key. Any other questions before I move on?
Oh boy, like negotiating the salary, like, okay, I'm gonna use my background for instance.
Oh, we ain't there yet. Hold on. You just hold on. We ain't there
Sorry,
yet.
I'm going ahead. Okay, I'm sorry. I apologize. 'Cause
That's
that is
okay.
that is an iffy topic when you discuss your money and how much you want. Like, let's negotiate the money.
Yeah, it ain't that hard. You just gotta walk in there and say, what would a man do? That's all. That's what I, you know, that's what you do. Just walk in there and say, how would a man handle this? If you're not confident in yourself, pretend you're a man for half an hour. But we're going to talk about strategies around that. So when we think about salary and compensation, obviously the base salary is what you see on the job postings. It's what you see in your paycheck, right? They say this job pays $75,000. That's your base salary. You know, it's what you see in your paycheck after taxes. Total compensation is everything else. So, you know, y'all unmute yourselves. What is included for you in total compensation? What do you think is in that bucket?
Medical
Healthcare
benefits,
benefits,
Benefits, what else?
401k.
401k, what else?
Stock
Vacation.
options,
Vacation, what else?
stock
stock
options,
options,
Stock options, what else?
tuition reimbursement,
Tuition reimbursement, what else? So y'all get the top 5 and then all of a sudden it gets quiet. What else?
deferred compensation,
Like
like part of your salary is paid later. so that you don't pay taxes on it currently.
Bonuses? I don't know.
Also like a 401 or something where you're putting money aside?
No, it's different than that, but it's not important. I mean, it is important, but it's not something that everybody gets.
Okay.
Oh.
Maybe teachers get that because they're off 2 months of the summer, maybe? Is that what you mean?
No, I mean, teachers sometimes can elect to be paid over 12 months or 10 months.
Right.
But deferred compensation, so I've got a brother-in-law who makes a very high salary. He didn't want to pay taxes on it while he was working. He was able to defer some of his salary until after age 70.
So that's either a 401 or an IRA or something like that. I mean, it's a governmentally controlled thing because you can't just not pay taxes on your salary.
No,
So
because
it's going into a
receiving.
product of some sort.
Okay, it's separate. Okay.
So what else? What else is in total compensation?
Would
Yeah.
FMLA be considered?
I'm sorry.
Did you
For
say?
my husband, For
Did I hear-
instance, he has a company vehicle.
Yeah, yeah.
he has a
A
cell
car
phone.
allowance could be, absolutely.
cell
What else?
phone And a laptop.
Sure,
where he has
computer
to do his work
technology,
on.
absolutely.
And, obviously they pay the cell phone, so.
Yep, cell phone, absolutely. Anything else?
Mileage
know if you're
reimbursement?
Mileage reimbursement, yeah.
I don't know if you're thinking this broadly. I don't usually think of it as compensation, but given your question, do I get a private office? Or do I?
Could be. Yep, absolutely. And I mean, to extend that, it could even be, can I work from home, right? Things like that. Can I work remotely? So some of the things that are included in total compensation: discounts and allowances, gym memberships, travel allowances, flexible work. I mentioned I spent a lot of time working in luxury retail. Almost everywhere I worked, I had a clothing allowance, and we'll talk about a negotiation I did later on relative to that. But PTO, now, again, if you're working for a competent organization that has a compensation plan, PTO may or may not be negotiable, but it depends on the company. Annual bonuses, could be quarterly bonuses. What else is coming up here? Why are these coming up one at a time? Clearly, I did not make these salaries, these slides. Various insurances, disability. One of the things we're looking at at my company is to offer pre-tax pet insurance, primarily because the CEO is a dog lover. He brings his dog to work every single day, Dudley. He also hates org charts, but we're like, hi, we're HR, we need to do an org chart. And so he's like, fine, but Dudley's at the top. So on our corporate org chart, his dog is at the top of the org chart. So, pre-tax pet insurance kind of makes sense in our company. It is a given, even though we're developing a pet policy. If you have a pet, you can bring it to the office with you. So again, all of these things can factor into your total compensation package, right? And they will show up differently. Some companies might give you a cell phone. Some companies might give you an allowance towards you using your own cell phone or buying a second cell phone, right? So they all show up differently, and it's important to know, or at least ask, what this looks like when you're negotiating for a role. In our Philadelphia office, because people are actually coming back into the office complex, they actually opened up a gym on the main floor. And so now, and it's a nice gym. I saw it a couple of weeks ago when I was there. So now that's a savings, right? Depending on where you go. I mean, you could go to Planet Fitness and pay $10 a month, or if you're doing, private Pilates classes or CrossFit classes, you can be paying anywhere between $100 to $200 a month. So if you're saving that because your company offers you a gym membership, that's a great savings, right? So all of these things can be factored in when you're thinking of your total compensation, what you're going to be receiving from this company that you're joining. Any questions on that?
I just thought of another one.
Yeah.
On trading floors, they often buy lunch for everybody, so you don't have to pay for your lunch. But even beyond that and more, broadly, companies in New York anyway used to subsidize the cost of lunches by having their own cafeteria and offering lower rates to buy meals than you would have to pay if you went outside.
Yeah. And, and of course, when the big Gen Z boom happened, everybody's like, oh my God, these children, we've got to acknowledge them. And so, they started doing the bagel breakfasts and the pizza Fridays and all this kind of stuff. And again, I say that comes down to culture. And I also say it comes down to what kind of environment do you want to work in? Because let's take Zappos, for example. Zappos has a fully stocked pantry. You can come in the morning. Oh, by the way, you didn't get a chance to drop off your dry cleaning. So you could just drop it off at the concierge. They'll send it out for you. Then you can go into the pantry and get breakfast. You can go in the pantry and get lunch. You can go in the pantry and get dinner. They have a person who runs a cupcake cart around the corporate office. So at any time, you can just pick up a cupcake if you want a cupcake. They have little sleeping pods, which is wonderful because if you want to take a nap, you can go and take a nap in the sleeping pods. Need your car detailed? Just let them know at the concierge, they can detail your car while they're there. Sounds great, right? I would never work for Zappos. Never. Why? Because this is a culture that's trying to eliminate all the reasons that you would need to leave the office. If they can bring all of those services to you at the office, you have no reason to leave. You can show up at 7 o'clock in the morning, work straight through, stay for dinner. They'll even pack up a to-go box for your dinner. So if you've got a hungry spouse or kids waiting at home, they'll say, so that way you don't have to leave early to cook. They will send you home with food. They'll give you a place to take a nap so you can stay there until 9 or 10 or 11 o'clock. I would never work for Zappos. Now, on the face of it, sounds really attractive. Sounds like you're saving money. But are you really saving? Are you saving your life? What happens when your kids have a softball game and you want to leave at 3 o'clock, right? What happens when you actually don't want to be around the people you're working with every day and you want to take a break and leave at 6 or 7, right? They have created a culture where you have no reason to leave. So I say that to say, again, it comes down to the culture. Right? And you have to be mindful not only about what they offer, but the motivation behind what they offer. Okay, moving on. So preparation, your salary homework. Have to do your research. And again, we'll touch on a couple of websites where you can do research on salary and market value, things like that. But you also need to prepare a budget for your personal financial needs. One of the worst things you could do is take a job that pays you less than what you need to live comfortably, right? If you're doing the right thing and you're doing your research and you create your own personal budget, and let's make up numbers. Let's say you need $63,000 a year to pay your bills, pay your rent or your mortgage, whatever that is for your personal budget. Let's say you need $63,000 to live. And you take a job that pays 57. Why? Because now not only are you working, but you're still struggling, right? So you have to know what your personal needs and budget is before you can start negotiating with the company. And then be prepared to ask those right questions. And some of them we've already talked about with culture and benefits and total compensation and all of that. But then you also have to be prepared to negotiate. Questions on that? So, COVID and the impact of COVID. So, the question of has COVID affected the company? Like, how could it not, right? I mean, how could it not? aside from the tragedies that have happened, I've worked in my company, we have lost people to COVID. That in and of itself is impactful to the business, right? But, it's also presented challenges that companies are still figuring out and still trying to answer, right? It was fairly easy when COVID first hit. Companies said, oh my God, close the doors, go home, work from home, figure it out. Even in that, some companies had to say, well, what are we going to do for people who can't do their job from home, right? If you're a receptionist, you probably can't do the essential functions of your job from home. So what are we going to do? And companies had to very quickly come up with, are we just going to pay you? Are we going to give you a portion of your salary? Are we going to lay you off? What are we going to do? Right? But now that COVID allegedly is gone, we've got vaccinations and boosters. People feel like coming back out into the world again. Companies are still figuring this out, because a lot of people went home and they're like, you know what? I like it here. I like my home. And by the way, I was productive for 2 years at home. Why do I now have to come back to the office, right? Other people said, oh my gosh, when are you opening the office? My children are driving me crazy. My dog only barks during Zoom meetings. And by the way, I don't have a home office. So my laptop is permanently perched on my kitchen counter, right? I need to be back in the workspace. Other folks said, well, I kind of like being home, but, I do kind of miss my colleagues. So I wouldn't mind going into the office 2 or 3 days a week, right? So companies have had to navigate all of that. And it's really interesting post-COVID to see what some companies are doing. Some companies have come up with a work from home policy. Some companies have taken it a step further, which I find fascinating, and they're calling it a work from wherever policy, meaning you literally do not need to be in your home state. The reason this is different and impactful is if you're working from home, I know what state you're in and I know what taxes need to be applied. If you're working from wherever, then we got to come up with a process where you notify me where you are, because in certain states, if you stay in those, like New York is one of them, if you do business in New York for I think more than 1 day, technically you should be taxed New York taxes for that day. Now, most companies don't do it. New York puts it out there to try to discourage people coming in and working, and they don't get their piece, but it's out there. Technically, it's a law. So now if we have a work from wherever policy, what does that mean? What does that mean for VPN access when you're traveling all over the place with your laptop? Now there's a little bit of extra security we need to be thinking about, right? So COVID has presented endless opportunities and also endless challenges. One of the big things that happened with my company is when we decided that we were getting ready to open the offices, and we opened our offices up, I want to say end of July, beginning of August last year. And again, our CEO has a philosophy that we bring people together for live sports and entertainment. Therefore, we are not a work from home policy. So the expectation was to come back to the office. At the same time, we also notified people that in order to come back to the office, they had to be vaccinated. Well, you can imagine how lovely it was to be in HR having conversations with people saying, you can't force me. I have, immunization, blah. And then we were just like, look, it's a policy. You want your job, you got to get vaccinated. There are 2 accommodations. You can fill out a religious and a medical. Other than that, I don't wanna is not an accommodation that's going to be approved. And believe it or not, we didn't lose that many people. There were 1 or 2 people who ended up resigning, but we really did not lose that many people. There was a lot of blustering, a lot of I'm going to sue, a lot of you can't make me, a lot of this is illegal. But at the end of the day, we only probably lost maybe 3 people. But still, it was exhausting. As an HR person, it was exhausting to have to walk through that. So all of these things showed themselves during COVID, and companies are still figuring it out. Companies are still figuring out, do they want to have a remote workforce? Do they want to bring everybody back together? is there a way to have a happy medium? You know, some companies quite transparently are saying, you know what, we signed this lease for this office for 10 years and we're paying for it. So you know what, not for nothing, y'all are coming back just because we can't get out of this lease. Not necessarily fair to the employees, but it is what it is. So, so, you know, I say that to say that, again, that is a conversation that you need to be thinking about when you think about what your next step is if you're looking to change companies, because there are some companies that are still holding to that you must be vaccinated. In New York City, at least as of 2 weeks ago, I haven't checked recently, but as of two weeks ago, in New York City, you had to have had at least one shot in order to work in a New York City office building. So even if I've got contractors, and we had contractors coming in to do electrical work in our building, they had to show that they had at least had one vaccination shot, right? So depending on where you're working, you know, what city, what municipality, et cetera, it's still a thing. And of course, a private company can kind of say whatever they want as long as it's not violating the law. So questions on that? What are your thoughts about wanting to work from home, wanting not to work from home, et cetera, et cetera?
I can tell you that in the legal field, the attorneys would never let us take the files home. Never, not before COVID. It just didn't happen. The associates obviously is a different situation, but not the paralegals majorly. And I think that the landscape changed once everything's becoming paperless. And everything, it really forced the superior courts, right, to just put everything in digital form. And that's wonderful. So now I could tell you that many of our paralegals, friends or colleagues, are all now working from home for the most part. But some of them have gone back. They're not happy about it. But it really took COVID to change that. And I could tell you that right after COVID, I wanted a job, and what was offered to me was unbelievable in terms of a salary. I was just shocked. And people were saying, oh, the frustration of hearing people saying, oh, well, nobody wants to work. Absolutely not. I'm having an employer offer me a salary from 2003. So it wasn't a matter of we didn't want to work, but now I see the desperation, right? I see now the salaries changing, and you're absolutely right about that. There's this wave right now, and it's up. And it's not going to always stay there, because at some point, everyone's going to go back, and it's going to be a different landscape with regards to the fear of COVID. And we're going to go back to being 5 days a week in the office again.
Yeah. Yeah. It's very interesting. And it complicates the matter, right? Because again, when you're talking about negotiations and the desperation of some employers, some employers are willing to pay whatever to get a person, right? Yeah. But then what happens is you've got people in similar jobs already in the company. Well, they don't make that salary. And let's say you need multiple of that role. Let's say it's a staff accountant or an administrative assistant or a fill in the blank, whatever it is. Well, you got the one person who negotiated, you got the other person who didn't. Now you've got this gap in salary for essentially the same job. Well, at some point, you know, what is it? What did the chickens come to roost, or whatever that phrase is? At some point, that's going to have to be addressed, right? So at some point, you're going to have to look at that disparity and say, well, what are we going to do now? And hopefully the point isn't a lawsuit. You know?
The thing is, in legal, you're not allowed to speak about salary. And actually, if you do, you get brought into the boss's office. And you're chastised for
is that your company? And is that what they tell you? Because that absolutely violates the not FLSA, labor boards. It's one of those labor board something laws. The letters are leaving my mind right now. But basically, in unionized environments, you're not allowed to tell somebody you're not allowed to discuss salary. So what non-union employees have leaned into that and said, well, what's good for the goose is good for the gander. So if you can't tell unionized employees they can't discuss salary, then you can't tell us that either. And that has stood up in court. So that might be your company. Because again, companies will say anything, right? Companies will say anything and hope you believe it. You know, I can't tell you how many companies I've worked for that have tuition reimbursement policies. And they say, if you leave before 3 years after we pay for your tuition, you have to pay it back.
Yes, I've heard that.
No, you don't. No, you don't. They may send you nasty emails. They may even try to come after you. You don't have to pay it back.
Hmm.
So if you're willing to ignore it,
Mhm.
you're willing to get the harassing emails, you don't have to pay it back. What are they going to do? Are they, is a company really going to invest the time and effort of their legal team to take you to court when you've been essentially a good worker, probably, for $10 or $12 or $13,000? It's not cost effective. So they think they're going to harass you into it. They think they're going to have you sign a document that says you must do this. You must stay with us for 3 years or else.
Mhm.
I always tell people roll the dice on that one, because I've worked for companies where I've managed a tuition reimbursement process. People walked out the day after they got their degree. We maybe sent them one letter and that was it, and we let it go. So companies will tell you a lot of things that are not technically true in order to hope that you comply. So, and the reality is people talk about their salaries anyway, even if the company tells you not to. Every company always says, this is a personal thing. Well, guess what? More and more companies now are moving towards transparency. And they have to, because if they're doing business in states that require it, they can no longer say you can't talk about salary. Because when I'm looking at a job posting that is similar to my role, and it says that that job is paying, make up a number, $80,000, and I'm sitting in corporate America and I'm making 60, you better believe I'm having a conversation with somebody about my salary. Right? Because now I have access to information. So companies are moving away from that very quickly because more and more states are coming online. Colorado has laws around it. California has laws around it. New York has laws around it. I think Pennsylvania has laws around salary disclosure. More and more states are coming online with transparency around pay. So they can hold on to it for as long as they can till it hits their state. So anyway, other questions or comments? Excuse me.
Well, I do have a question because
Mhm.
there's a disparity between, I get constant emails or notifications of jobs in New York because I live 45 minutes from it. And the salaries are much higher. So my neighbor working in New York, I went to him and I said, hey, what is your tax implication, working in the city versus maybe working here? He said, oh, it's not worth it. He says, he tells me, you have to pay double taxes now. Yeah.
No, what
I'm like,
happens is
"That
you
doesn't
pay
sound right to
taxes
me."
in New York, and
Mhm.
then depending on what you're doing, you're not paying taxes in New Jersey. And when you file your taxes, you typically get whatever percentage, usually the bulk of it, back from New York, and then you pay in New Jersey. You're not paying double taxes. It may look like that. What some people do is some people they don't want to pay the New Jersey tax, especially if it comes due before they get their reimbursement for New York. So they may deduct for their New Jersey tax, and then they're required to pay tax in New York. So yeah, it looks like you're paying double tax, but you're getting a refund. I mean, I have spent the last 25 years living in New Jersey, working in New York. Happens every year. I just wish they would talk to each other. So that way I don't have to write a check to New Jersey and get a refund from New York. I wish they would just talk to each other and send me the difference.
Mm, okay.
But it's not double tax. And you are correct. Depending on where you live in New Jersey, there is definitely a cost differential where the salaries tend to be higher in New York. But
Mhm.
again, you have to do your chart, right? You have to think about, is it worth the commute? Like where I live, it's an hour and a half to my office.
Well, a lot
on
of these
good
companies
day.
are, I noticed like from COVID, after COVID, and in the year and a half, I've been really monitoring it, right? Because there's an opportunity, I'm going to go for it. But now there's like travel, where they reimburse you for the travel expenses, a travel stipend or something like that. They're now including that in the
Well,
compensation.
it's not required, so it depends on the company. Now, most companies that want to be attractive to employees will offer you pre-tax deductions for your travel. But again, it's not a required benefit. So some companies may offer it, some may not.
Right.
So,
Okay.
but yeah, it's again, when you're starting that negotiation, and by the way, that's not something you can negotiate, right? Because that's something that has to be offered to the whole company because as a benefit. So, if the company doesn't offer it, you can't say, well, could you give me pre-tax deductions for my they can't. But knowing that, let's say they don't offer it, because you've done your chart, right? Where I live, if I go in every day, it costs me, I think, $450 a month to take the bus back and forth if I go in every day, which I don't. So knowing that, I'm gonna do 450 times 12, add that to the base salary, what I'm thinking about, to make sure I'm covering my transportation costs, right?
Okay.
So again, that's why it's important to do your chart before you start the negotiation and do your research. If they've got that pre-tax deduction, great. And I forget what the maximum monthly, I think the maximum monthly is, don't hold me to it, I think it's $225 or something like that. So clearly it doesn't cover my $450. So again, I would still know that and add that to the salary if I were negotiating for a new job in New York, right?
Right.
But
Okay.
Deneen, just to clarify, that pre-tax withholding for transportation, you still have to pay for the transportation, right? You're just paying
Yeah.
your pre-tax
Yes.
salary.
Yeah, it's just like, it works just like a 401. So if you say, I want to put $100 in my transportation bucket, they deduct it from your base salary, which basically lowers what you're going to get taxed on eventually. And then, and that's how you're being taxed for your salary. So it lowers your taxable income by pulling that money out first and putting it in the transportation bucket
Right.
or account.
Mhm.
So yeah. So that's why people like it. It's a good thing. It lowers your income, because everything you can do to lower your income is a beautiful thing when it comes to taxes.
Mhm.
So
Just while we're on that subject
Yep.
of living in New Jersey and working in New York, because I had a lot of years of that also. One thing I found is while you don't pay double taxes, you pay some to New York, you pay some to New Jersey. The number of days that you actually travel into New York versus working at home or traveling someplace else matters. So you only pay New York taxes for the days that you work in New York. And so if you've got a situation where you're going to the office twice a week, but you're working at home the 3 other days a week, you're only paying New York taxes in the end for those 2 days.
well, and that depends on how your job is structured though, because for example, I had a job where I worked in New York. My home office was New York. The expectation was for me to work in New York. However, I would spend time in my New Jersey office on occasion. I was considered a New York employee. They taxed me 100% as a New York employee. So you have to
couldn't
be
get a
fully-
credit for the days you worked in New Jersey? That's what I did.
Most companies are not going to do that. I mean, if you've got a large HR organization with a large compensation department that has time to do that, they'll do that. It depends on the company. The company I work for, we had 3 people in compensation. Nobody was tracking days to see what days you were in New York versus what days you were in California versus what days you were anywhere else.
Oh, no, you
So-
misunderstood me. The
No, I
companies
understand.
didn't do
You're
it for
saying-
me, but when I paid my taxes, that's how I was able to allocate my time for which state I was paying taxes to.
Again, I don't have the energy to do that. If you're tracking where you are, when you're traveling, that's great. Right now, I would probably have to pay taxes this year alone in 6 different states if I needed to do that. I don't have time to do that. The country's making money off of me. That's the way I look at it. But again, it depends on the structure. That's a lot easier. Let's say if your job is structured where you are doing 3 days in one place, 2 days in another, it's easier to keep track. Being in HR, I'm a New York employee, but if an employee is acting a fool in New Jersey, guess what? I'm there tomorrow. I can't predict and try, again, don't have the energy to keep track of all of that information. But, to get back to your comment, Diana, at the end of the day, there is a salary differential. So it's something to investigate and something to negotiate around, but you also need to be mindful of knowing what it's going to cost you, not only in transportation fees, not only in lunch fees if they don't have a pantry, because trust and believe it's expensive to eat in New York. And if you're like me, I don't meal prep. So I end up either going out or snacking all day. And also, if you have responsibilities at home where you need to get home quickly for children, for elder care, whatever that case may be, that's something to consider, especially if you're taking public transportation. I'll never forget, I went to New York one day and we were supposed to snow. Got up in the morning, checked the weather, no snow, fine. Got in the office at 8 o'clock. By 11:30, my neighbor said, you better come home because it's starting to snow. I have an hour and a half commute. Plus, at 11:30 or whatever time it was, the next bus out of the city was 1 o'clock in the afternoon. So I had to wait until 1 o'clock. Needless to say, everybody who normally takes the 6 o'clock bus was on that 1 o'clock bus. We all commuted home. By the time we crossed the bridge, the snow was so heavy that commute home alone took me 4.5 hours, right? So again, it costs more than money. Sometimes it costs time and your sanity. And you have to sort of weigh that in there as well. So just keeping an eye on time. I didn't put these slides in here because they're really busy and nobody wants to read them, but just know that there are laws around discrimination, not only for harassment and discrimination, but there are also laws, and these are specific to New Jersey, around what an employer can and cannot say or can and cannot do relative to COVID, a COVID diagnosis, harassment connected to COVID. I'm sure many of you remember early on, there was inflammatory language being used around COVID, calling it the Chinese virus. There were a lot of Asian Americans that got really harassed in the workplace because of that. So there are a lot of laws protecting employees in general and specifically related to COVID. Again, this is not sort of an employee relations session, so I'm just going to skip through this to continue talking about negotiation. Again, more laws. There's the little website address on the bottom if you want to take a screenshot of that and look at that and look it up later. I would say a lot of these laws were more impactful at the beginning of COVID than they are now because so much of the population has been vaccinated and they're back in the office. But still, there are folks out there who may run into issues with needing protection if they were to catch COVID and need to be out of work for a certain amount of time, or they're caring for a child, God forbid, that catches COVID, and they need to be out of work for a certain amount of time to care for the child. So those laws are still in place. So again, when you're thinking of your value and what you're bringing to the table, because, as we've discussed, women tend to think about what the organization needs from them, not necessarily what they need for the organization. You also want to keep in mind things that you're bringing to the table. So your years of experience, your leadership experience, your level of education, your skills, licenses, all of that. And what I would also add to this is the one thing I think that is a huge miss for both men and women, I would say, is that people do not necessarily always discuss their skills and experiences that they gain from non-paying labor. And so what I mean by that is if you are the director of finance for your religious institution, you're using skills. You ain't getting paid, but you're using skills. If you are, on the board of your daughter's Girl Scout troop, you are developing leadership skills. Again, not getting paid, but you are developing leadership skills, right? And you should be talking about those skills and experiences, just like you talk about the skills and experiences that you gain from a job where you're getting a paycheck. And I think that's a really huge miss for people when they go into the workforce. They kind of look at those things and like, oh, well, that's just my church, or, that's what I do for my daughter. They don't look at it and say, how have I grown as a professional, volunteering my time and performing these activities? Did you lead a fundraiser? Did you raise money for the Girl Scouts? Did you bring in $24,000? Were you in charge of curating a gala for a local nonprofit, right? Those are skills that you bring to the table. The fact that you didn't get a paycheck is irrelevant. So when you think about your resume, think about how you're going to discuss that, because I will say also, it's not a given that a recruiter is actually going to ask you about them. So you may have to interject that you have those skills, even though it came from a non-paying role. Because at the end of the day, they're hiring you for your skills, not how much you got paid for the skills, because they shouldn't know what you got paid anyway. So, which I don't know if we're covering it in another slide, so I'll just mention it now. As with all the laws that are coming on deck around pay transparency, there are also laws coming on deck, and New York and New Jersey are, just talk about them since they're here, around that focus around pay equity. And so in New York, for example, if you're looking for a job in New York, recruiters, employers are not allowed to ask you what you made in prior workplaces, right? Now, the fact that they legally are not allowed to ask you that does not keep them from asking you that, because people will act like, oh, I forgot, what did you make of that job? And you're like, yeah, no, I'm not answering that question, right? Now, where that can be challenging and problematic is when you have headhunters out there, because headhunters can be aggressive. I am not a fan of them at all. And they can be aggressive, and they will find you on LinkedIn and they'll call you up and they'll say, I've got this great job and I just want to pre-screen you. And, I see at this last job you were, fill in the blank, whatever your role was. What did you make there? What was your total compensation? And you're going to say, well, I'd rather focus on the compensation for this new role that we're talking about. And they'll say, yeah, but I don't want to waste your time and I don't want to waste the company's time. So if your compensation is at a level that's not in alignment with the company, there's really no point in going forward. And you're like, yeah, that's why we're going to focus on what the company is looking to pay. They're not allowed to ask you that. And the reason these laws came about is because there was an awareness that women historically have made less than men. So the thought process was that by eliminating that ask, then women had a fair fighting chance. Well, kind of, sort of, maybe, right? Because let's say, making up numbers again, the average woman is making 60, the average man is making 80. Well, now we're no longer to ask that. So technically we don't know, so it should be fair, right? Except it's not, because that woman is saying, God, if I could get a $10,000 increase, that would be awesome. And that man is saying, God, if I could get a $10,000 increase, that would be awesome. So now I don't have to tell you. And so now both get hired, and now the woman's making 70 and the man's making 90. Still not equity, right? But it's a stab at it. And what I say to people in that situation is ask for what you're worth. I don't care if you made $52,000 in your last job. If this job you feel is valued at 125, you ask for 130. Nobody needs to know what you made at your last job. Ask for what you're worth. Now, in your head, you might be saying, holy crap, there's no way I can ask for an $80,000 increase. Yes, you can. Yeah, you can. We're going to talk about it. You certainly can. So, but the key here is do not tell them what you made. And by the way, you might have to walk away from a job if you hold to that value, right? Because I have had plenty of recruiters say to me, well, look, we can't go forward unless I know what you make. And I'm like, okay, have a good day. Walk away. Because for every recruiter out there, there are 20,000 more that are going to contact you. They act like they have the sole one job that you will ever need in your life. It is not true, right? So you have to think about where you are in the spectrum of work. And by that, I mean, if you're already in a job and you're looking for a next better, higher paying, higher level job, but you're paying your bills, you're going on vacation, you're good. You can be cocky, right? You can be like, look, you can take a walk if you think I'm going to tell you what I made, because I'm not, because you're paying your bills. If you're unemployed and the mortgage is in jeopardy, you might have to do what you got to do. And there's no shame in that, right? So you got to think about where you are in the process. There's no shame in, and I won't even use the word that I was thinking of. There's no shame in taking something today to fill a gap, because today is not the end of the line, right? So you got to think of where you are in that spectrum. So your value, think about all this stuff. Okay, moving on. So salary dance. The key here with this slide is you have to practice. And when I say practice, quite honestly, I don't mean practice with people who love you. Because you know what? They're going to look at you and be like, okay, let's role play it. So what did you make at your last job? And you're going to like, well, really, I'd like to focus on the new job that we're talking about. And they'll go, okay, that's not the real world. Practice with somebody who's going to be a hard ass. Okay. It's getting late. I'm going to use the language now. Practice with somebody who's going to be a hard ass with you. Practice with somebody like Willa. Practice with somebody who's going to say to you, no, I really need to know. And then is going to call you on it when you cave, because it's uncomfortable, right? It's uncomfortable. No, going in when you have these negotiation conversations, you're probably going to have butterflies in your stomach and you're going to feel uncomfortable. Know that going in. And you might even stutter. No one ever died from stuttering. So just keep moving forward, right? So you got to practice. When somebody says, what's your current salary or what's your total compensation? Your mind may go to being truthful. In that moment, you got to tell your mind, that honest part of your mind, to shut up and focus on the other part of your mind that's going to focus on what you want and what you need to get, right? So if you're making 52 and your total compensation is around 75, that's the first thing that's going to want to try to sneak out of your lips. And you've got to go, and you go, well, actually, for total compensation, I'm looking for 110. But I'm flexible with that depending on what that looks like. Because you don't want to say 110 full stop, because they'll say, well, you know, gee, this job pays 89, so you're out of our ballpark. You're going to say total compensation of 110, but I'm flexible as to what that looks like. That keeps the conversation open, right? So just be mindful about, and I hate saying this, I can't even believe I'm saying this, I'll have to rephrase it better later. Be mindful about not necessarily telling the first truth, right? Because the first truth will probably be that little voice in your head saying, I'm not worth it. Can I ask for it? I shouldn't ask for more. Do I really deserve it? Can I actually get in there and do the job and actually prove that I'm worth it? All of that's going to be going on in your head. Tell that to go sit down in the corner and ask for the 110, even if you're making 52 right now. Can we all do that? Can we agree to do that? Okay, good.
Yes.
Awesome. Questions on that? And we'll talk about what that looks like as well in a minute, but in general, questions on that?
I have a question on that.
Yes.
Actually, you're absolutely right. I had that bad experience with a recruiter not too long ago. And I was afraid to, I didn't even tell Coach Willa because she would have tore my head off.
Yes, she would have.
Because it was pitiful. But this man calls me, you know, pretty much tells me, send me your resume like right now. What are you looking for? What's your salary? And I said, well, I think at a minimum, and that's what I did exactly what you said. I say 80,000. That's a bare minimum of what I would think. He's like, okay, so we're talking about 75 then, right? 75 to 80. I'm like, no, 80. He's like, well, so, okay, we'll just say 75. And then, you know, and he so strong-armed me to send this resume that wasn't ready. And I'm like, why is he offering me 75? So I go like exactly what you said. I went online. The starting salary to that position was 93. across the board from 93 to 150,000. And I'm like, what did I just do to myself?
Yeah, exactly. And so that's the thing you need to know, especially with executive recruiters. First of all, the one thing you need to know is, I'd say at least a third of the time, jobs aren't real. Jobs aren't real. They're just going on LinkedIn, finding people and saying, send me your resume. So that way, when they actually get to recruit for that job, they can go to that hiring manager, go, look at all the candidates I have. That job may not be real today. So that's why I personally don't send my resume out anymore. I don't send it. I say, if you want to see what I've done, look at my LinkedIn account. I keep it updated. Well, just send me your resume. No. You can download a PDF, because if you're really interested in me, you could do the work.
Mhm.
Go to my LinkedIn. Now, to say that, you have to make sure you keep your LinkedIn profile updated, but
Yeah.
keep it updated. And in that way, you don't get that stress of, oh, I got to send it. Like, no, go to my LinkedIn. If you're that interested, you can download a PDF. You know, but they make it. And by the way, I know we're at 8 o'clock. I've got time. If you've got time, I've only got a couple more slides. So, you know, I want to be respectful of everybody's time, but, you know, good
I'm good.
conversation happening. So I don't want to shut
You're
it
good. I'm
down.
good.
I'm good.
Okay.
This is very good.
Okay. But yeah, I mean,
So recruiters are really, we should really send them to our LinkedIn.
I have a very limited respect for, external recruiters, very limited respect for them. Internal recruiters in a company may be a little bit different, maybe not. And I say that, and I head up the talent acquisition department, and we do not behave that way, by the way. But yeah, especially when it's a search firm,
Mhm.
I got about this much tolerance for them, because again, not only are they trying to find the candidates, but they're also trying to sell their value to the company as a search company that can get the job done. So what they do when they're not actively on a search is they're going out and finding candidates to fill their files. So when that call does come in, they're going to go, oh, I got this great woman, Diana, spoke to her. Yeah, I got a resume. I'll send it right over.
Mm.
Meanwhile, they asked you 3 months ago and nothing materialized because it wasn't real then.
Mhm.
So that's why I don't send resumes anymore. I'm like, go to LinkedIn. You have all the information you need right there. But, and I will say also, if you are not comfortable with this salary negotiation yet, if this comes up, and you know, I'm constantly trying to find the positive of COVID because there was so much negative, but you know, a lot of the positive is a lot of this stuff happens over the phone now. You're not going into offices, you're not meeting recruiters face to face. That's a beautiful thing if you get nervous and flustered with this. And if you get somebody who calls you, say, you know what? Thank you for the information. Send me the job description. I'll get back to you. Well, just let me know your salary. Let me look at the job description I don't want to waste your time if it's not exactly right. I'll get back to you. Get off the phone. I always get off the phone. If you stay too long, they may wear you down.
Mm.
So, and that's probably what happened to you, because he made it urgent. He was like, look, I just know it's a great job. You look great. Just send me, and what do you make again? And you're like, and then you blurt, right? This is an anti-blurting situation here. We do not want to blurt when we're doing a salary negotiation. So, okay. So again, I would say when you blurted, you probably weren't thinking about all the things we were thinking about with total compensation, right? Because that number would have been a lot higher.
Right.
So, you know, there are certain things you can negotiate. There are certain things you can't. And so you have to keep that in mind, right? And in this day and age, I can't even imagine this existing, but let's pretend there's a company out there that doesn't offer medical coverage, right? That's not really something you can negotiate if they don't offer it. That is a company-wide insurance plan that has governmental rules around it. They're not just going to do it for one person, right? Just because you ask. Some companies might have more structure around things like signing bonuses or stock options. You know, they may have very strict compensation rules around, you know, managers get something, directors get something else, vice presidents get something else, et cetera, right? So like in my company, vice presidents and above have unlimited vacation. Good luck taking it, but you have unlimited vacation. You know, if you come in as a manager, you are not getting unlimited vacation, full stop. You're just not getting it. Now, you may trying to negotiate getting 3 weeks instead of 2 weeks or something like that, but you're not getting unlimited vacation, right? So you have to be mindful of things that you can negotiate versus things that you can't. Something like tuition assistance, if a company doesn't have it, they may not have it, but meaning they may not have a program around it, but you still might be able to leverage a conversation around, I believe in developing myself. This is going to help me in my job. And therefore, are you willing to give me $2,000 a year for career development? Right? So that's something where they may or may not have a program, but you still may or may not be able to negotiate it. Relocation expenses, if you're open to moving, is another thing. And that's a whole different conversation because relocation gets very complicated. But anyway, that is, again, something that you could negotiate. So you just want to be mindful of things that you can negotiate and things that you can't. And also what's important to you to negotiate around versus what isn't. And again, I'll give you an example when we end around how I negotiated an offer. I think one of the key things is, again, because they should not be asking you what you make, most competent organizations are going to have a budget for a job. Companies don't just wake up and go, oh, let's go hire somebody and well, we'll just see what we have to pay them. Most companies are working with their finance department to say, there is a range of, making up numbers again, 75 to 90 that we're willing to pay for this job. So since they had to work with finance to get that budget approval, that means they know what the range is. So you should feel comfortable saying to them, what is the range that's budgeted for this job? If they don't tell you, you can say, oh, that's okay. If you need to check with finance, you can call me back. Again, you're not going to jump out of a window and feel like the world is coming to an end if they can't answer you at that moment. You can wait. If they don't have that number offhand, they can go check with finance and get back to you, right? So they should have a budget for that job and they should be able to tell you. And depending on what state it's in, they might be required to tell you. And again, make sure that you state that, the total compensation package is negotiable. Not necessarily the base salary, but maybe it is, but the total compensation package is negotiable. When it comes to the offer, and again, I'll zoom through this, but there are certainly things that you want to talk to the hiring manager before you absolutely say yes. What are the expectations? What is the typical career path? Again, that is if you're interested in the career path and growing versus retiring, right? In that case, you might ask, what does a retirement package look like? Where will I be working? How many days should I be in the office? All of those things. That's at the point of offer, because that's when it's getting very specific and you are the one they're focusing on. These are some other things. And again, when it comes to benefits are insurance plans that the company purchases from an insurance provider. This is not something that they got to figure out how to tell you. Aetna and Cigna and all of those companies that manage benefit plans, once those contracts are signed, they send companies PDFs and booklets and one-pagers and all that stuff. So when you're getting an offer made, the next thing you should be asking for is, can I see the benefit package? And if they go, oh, well, I don't know. Well, that's okay. I can wait. Check with your benefit and comp person. I'm sure they have it from, who did you say you had? You had Cigna? Yeah, check with your benefit and comp person. I'm sure they have a document from Cigna. And the reason that you want to see the benefit package before you start negotiating, and it's key before you start negotiating, right? Let's say the company has a really sucky benefit plan and you have a family and that benefit plan shows that you're going to be paying, making up a number, $300 a month out of your check towards your benefits. Well, now, $300 times 12 months a year is coming out of your check for benefits. That decreases your take home, right? Which means you got to negotiate harder for a higher number. Versus if the benefit package says, we pay for the benefits, not a dime comes out of your check. You're still going to negotiate, but now it's not as critical because you're not lowering your income because you're paying for benefits out of your package, right? So you want to see what the benefit package is, so you know what the deductions will be before you negotiate. Because that's typically the biggest dollar amount that comes out of your check, aside from taxes, which you have no control over. So what is the benefit? Have them send it to you. Of course, vacation, personal, sick days. You know, most companies have a plan around that. So the only thing I would really ask about that is are there individual personal vacation and sick days, or is it PTO, right? Because PTO means I don't have to lie and say I'm sick when I'm not, right? Also, what it means is in certain states, you're required to pay vacation out when you leave. If it's PTO, that looks very differently. So if you're like me, when I left the garden, I got paid out for 4.5 weeks of vacation, because I never took vacation. So I got paid out for 4.5 weeks of vacation. If it were PTO, it would have been a little bit different, right? So you might want to know whether it's PTO versus separate buckets of vacation, personal, and sick. And then we've kind of talked about the remote working situation, hours you're working, what onboarding is looking like, all of that. Just a little note about the counter offer for those who are currently in jobs. You know, at some point, once you've done the negotiation, you get the offer letter, you sign the offer letter. We'll talk about the offer letter in a second. You're going to go back to your boss and say, I just accepted a new job. So, you know, here's my 2 weeks notice and I'm leaving. Your boss may say, wait, what are they paying you? I'll counter that. Now, here's the thing. You can do that, right? But what I always offer to people is, if you're leaving because you felt you were undervalued and underpaid, and you had that conversation with your boss or with HR before, why is it they can find the money now? Why can they find the money now? Why couldn't they find it before? When you said, I want a promotion, I want more money, I deserve a bigger increase. Why couldn't they find it then? But now that you're going to leave them and it's inconvenient for you to leave them, why are they going to counter your offer now? It's not about you. It's not about retaining you. It's about they don't want to spend the time and energy to now go out and recruit for your replacement. It would be easier to throw you an extra $10,000 or $15,000 than it's going to cost them to find somebody to replace you. So, and again, you can choose to take their counter, right? It may be beneficial for you in the long run, you know, or not, but think about why they can find the money now when they couldn't find it before. So that's what I would say about the counter offer. And also what I've seen people do from an HR perspective is they'll give you the counter, and then when it comes to your next annual salary increase, all of a sudden you're not getting as big a percentage as you would have, because they're basically taking that money that they would have paid you when the annual salary increase, and they're giving it to you early. So there is a point where you're negotiating and maybe you're just not getting everything that you want or the things that are important to you. And that's when you need to go back to your list, see what's important, see where you are in your life, and decide whether or not you're going to go with that job. Again, if the bank is calling you because you haven't paid your mortgage, you might take the job anyway. But keep looking, right? If the bank's not calling you and you're good where you are, you may say thanks, but no thanks. And again, I wouldn't leave that in a negative space. I would say to them, you know what, this looks like it's not going to work out. However, I will certainly be happy to look into my network to see if I know somebody who might be a fit for you. You can always find a way to leave it on a positive note. But there might be times when you just have to walk away because you're just getting the feeling that you're not getting what you want, or it's not worth it, or whatever the case may be. These are just some questions here that you may want to ask while you're negotiating. You may want to find out, why did the last person leave? Were they promoted? Were they fired? Did they just leave? You know, ask them about the structure and the culture. If they make an offer, ask them where that salary falls in the the company may have compensation bands. are you at the low end of the compensation band? Are you at the high end of the compensation band? It might be good to be at the high end of the compensation band because you're getting more money today, but does that mean you now need to be promoted to get more money? Well, a promotion might not be for 2 or 3 years down the road. So, being at the high end of the compensation band also might not be the best thing. So something, again, to keep in mind. And again, I'm trying to be respectful of time, so I'm just kind of moving through some of these things that you probably already know. It's always appropriate to say no, thank you, if you feel, even if you're just getting vibes, if you're just getting vibes that you don't like the way the negotiation is working, all of a sudden the conversation have become combative, or the person that you were really excited to work with, all of a sudden you're seeing a different side of them, always appropriate to say no, thank you. If they're not willing to negotiate with you, I would ask them why, right? Because there are some companies that don't believe in negotiation. When I worked at Tiffany & Company, we had a culture that we believed we did our due diligence. We looked at the market. We believed that we paid at the high end of what the market offered and that we had great benefits. And therefore, we did not negotiate. The offer was the offer, but that was our culture and that was our standard. So when you're doing your research around culture and you find that out, then you may not hold the fact that they don't negotiate with you against them. But if they're just not willing to negotiate, I'd ask them why. And if they say, well, this is as good as it gets and you get take it or leave it or whatever, okay, I'll make my decisions. I'll get back to you. And don't feel rushed in making that decision. Because again, if they say, I need an answer tomorrow, or I need if it's Friday, I need an answer by Monday. Again, that's not about you. That could be they've got a candidate holding on in case you turn it down and they don't want to lose that second candidate. That's why they're trying to make you make a decision fast, because they don't want to lose that next person while you're thinking about it and negotiating, right? So you do what you need to do to make sure you're making the right decisions for yourself. And if that means you need extra time to think about it, to do more research, then you take it. So these are some of the resources where you can go to find information about salary. Again, you could just, Google has gotten so good, you can just say, what does a paralegal working in Edison, New Jersey get paid with 30 years of experience? And Google translates all of that and it'll pop up some information for you. But these are certainly places, salary.com, Glassdoor, PayScale, et cetera, are places where you can find information. Certainly, depending on the salary ranges you're looking at, you may want to Google the Department of Labor. And the other thing I'll say, and I'll say 2 more things and then I'll stop and I'll answer questions. Depending on your role, and I'm always surprised when people may or may not know this, you want to know whether you're non-exempt or exempt, right? Exempt means you don't earn overtime. Non-exempt means you do. So depending on how much overtime is baked into the job, it may actually be beneficial to you to be in a non-exempt role where there's a lot of overtime because you're getting paid at time and a half, versus being exempt where you're getting a flat salary and you're working 80,000 hours regardless of the pay. Again, being non-exempt or exempt is not something you negotiate. You just need to know which one it is. But that's important to know. And that way you can negotiate appropriately, because if you're in a job where they're offering 70, let's say, and they say, oh, absolutely, there's at least 10, 15 hours of overtime every week. Well, if you're 70 and you're exempt, I want more money, right? But if you're making the equivalent of whatever $70,000 is divided by 2080, that's your hourly rate, and you're non-exempt, and they tell you 10 to 15 hours of overtime, I'm golden now, right? So again, you may or may not want to negotiate as hard for the salary if they're saying absolutely 10 to 15 hours of overtime every week and you're non-exempt. So just something to think about. Again, it's not negotiable, but important for you to know. Any questions? I apologize. It's 8:19. Any questions? Random about negotiation? What
Well,
have you?
I have a question. And
Yes.
it's, you know, coming from legal, I know what's legal and what's not in some aspects, broader aspects, not as much as you do, obviously, but so I worked for a school district. I went for a job interview. I was pretty much second interview. I called my girlfriend before that second interview. She said, they're calling you back. The job is yours. She said, make sure that you're ready to accept whatever salary in your mind that you think you're wanting, because it's going to be had. Conversation is going to be, and spot on. What she said was exactly true. I was told after I left that second interview what salary they were, and based on, what is acceptable, because they only give you, for instance, if you're an educator, they'll give you credit for that year as an experience in their tier. They had a tier program. So if you were category 1 through 10 or whatever it was. So I was giving, for every 3 years, I was given 1 year of credit. So I was at, whatever it was, $50,000, but their medical compensation was great and whatnot. She actually brought my paperwork to the superintendent, and I can't prove it, but I think that that superintendent called my old employer and flat out denied my application. Which, we know they're not supposed to berate, belittle us or whatever you want to call it in our next job. How does, she wanted me in the worst way. And she said, she was appalled. Actually, when she called me back, she said, I don't know what just happened. But the superintendent said no.
Mhm.
And I'm here, I am still jobless. Now I'm pretty upset about that, because, then what does that tell me? That I can't get a job in Morris County? That's pretty much it, because all superintendents meet monthly. So how do I go past that? So now I've sent out application after application. I'll call them. They'll tell me that, they're going through the applications. I just get a sense that there is some sort of under rumblings where they talk to each other, and there's just, you get blacklisted.
Possibly. I mean, there's nothing to say about that other than possibly, right? Like, you will
Well-
never know unless somebody, leaks a voice recording of that, and the only thing I would say is, like, are you wealthy enough to hire an attorney to challenge them and say, I believe and I want to do it? Of course not.
Well-
And even if you were, most people don't want that energy in their life to have to
No,
do that.
I'm certainly not going to do that. But I guess my question is this, it leads to this. This is the question. So the explanation given to me, because I said, then what was the reason for me not being hired? Because that's really what you should ask anyway, right? Was there a credential? Was there anything I was missing? What? She said, they said that you had what is that? What's the terminology? She said that I just had a lot of different jobs. And I said to her, well, are they really looking at my resume? Because my last employer was 11 years. And there was another one there that I did per diem work within that time. Same
They're
employer.
making excuses. They're making
So
excuses.
should I have written a letter is my question, or should I just,
What would it accomplish?
I don't know. I guess just to kind of leave it for the record, because I don't know.
I mean, you could, but at the end of the day, if they're going to make some lame excuse that you had a lot of different jobs, they saw that on your resume before they even had a conversation with you. So at that point, they're just making excuses. There is potentially, who knows, possibly something else going on in the background. Maybe you stepped on somebody's toe at one point and they're holding against you for the rest of your life. I don't know. But if it's not something you can prove, you have to ask yourself, do you want to expend the energy to go and, start talking to people and find out who's saying what and see if it's something you can prove or not?
No.
And if you think that it's inherent in the school board, commissioners, whatever that structure is that you're applying for, then maybe you need to not apply in that space anymore, where you're applying in a different industry or in a different environment where people wouldn't have access to whatever information you believe is being shared about you. Because just from your limited description, it sounds like there's not a lot of concrete information there that you're going to get any answers. And at the end of the day, even if you get answers,
Mhm.
then what? Right?
Right.
I mean, you could go, meet the guy in an alleyway and threaten him, but short of that, nothing's really going to change.
Well, there's an opportunity coming up and I just, for kicks, to be honest with you, I don't think I'm interested. I think, I got my bad dose and I don't think I'll ever go back to school district, but there's something that's going to be coming up that I know someone who knows them when they're personally. And I would be curious to see what'll be said about me because
Well, I mean, you can look at that two ways. You can look at it as if you truly believe that there's something in the universe that's negative out there in this environment, you can ask yourself, why bother? And
Right.
not even apply, right? Or you could look at it and say, look, it may be negative, it may be positive, who knows, but at least I'll get practice interviewing and look at it that way.
Well, the
And look at
concern
it
is
as a form of practice.
I was out of work somewhere in the midst of COVID, like June of 2020, I stopped working. And I didn't start work again until November of 2021. So what I wanted to do was not show this big gap, right, in my resume. But if this former employer is going to disparage me, then I might as well not put it on there and say, okay, I haven't worked in 2 years. Do I lie about that? And
But
You
you
know,
don't know who it
that's-
is, and you don't know that definitely. So
yeah, I honestly don't think that I'm getting, I was told that the way they know is what's not said about me. Right?
well, we all have that thing. And that's the thing. I mean, any ethical HR person is only going to give name, rank, and serial number, right? They're going to give your name, the dates that you worked there, the title that you held, that's it. Now, if somebody says, I've worked with people where I'm not allowed to give information, but if the recruiter says, well, can you tell me about them? I'll say things like, well, I can't tell you how amazing it was to work with them and how I hated that they left me. That tells the recruiter a lot, right?
Mhm.
But I could also say, yeah, I absolutely cannot comment on that one. That tells the recruiter something as well, right? You'll never know. So I would say, what you need to think about is, why is your ego hurt about it? And how are you going to move forward?
Mhm.
Because that job's not coming your way. So you got to move forward.
I hate bullies. That's
I
the only
know.
thing. I hate
I know.
bullies and I know what he did was not legal and to be honest with you, the reason why I was fired, it was because there's unethical things going on there. And I asked too many questions. And so it is what it is, but that's what bothers me. Because
Yeah.
now you're trying to stop me from getting another job when you know what you're doing is not okay. So I think you're right. It's bothering my ego in some ways because, I had an amazing 25-year career with the hardest people you can work for, which is attorneys, because they're
Mhm.
pretty blunt and they're hard on you. And then I go to a school district and it's a secretary. And I don't want to belittle the position, but it was, wasn't too difficult if I got the proper training, which I did not.
Yeah.
So it's hard to explain to the next person, like, oh, what happened to this job? And try to keep it sort of in a light perspective.
You say it
and-
wasn't a fit. You say you don't
that's what I
owe them
said.
the truth. You do not owe them the truth. And again, I'm not trying to tell you to lie, but you
Mhm.
do. And goes back to that bullet that I said about, especially for women, we talk too much. You do not owe them the truth. You do not owe them an explanation of why it didn't work out. You do not owe them the information that you felt there were unethical things going on there and you were working for a bully. You
Right.
did your time, you got your experience, you felt that you had more opportunity to grow in another environment, and you chose to move on. And full stop.
Perfect. That's a great.
You
way to
do
put
not
it.
owe them the full truth. I will never say lie because I believe in karma, but you also do not owe them the full truth.
Okay. Now,
But we can just say that wasn't a fit for me.
Yeah.
That wasn't a well.
Was
And I
it?
would put some more flowers to that. I would say, it wasn't a fit for me because I very quickly felt stagnant.
Yeah, well, and that's true. Yeah. Because I'm not growing. There's no growth potential. There's nothing.
I quickly-
Okay, thank you.
That's all.
Okay.
You don't
Clear.
owe them all the details, right?
Mhm.
Who else? Who else has questions or comments or Tanisha sitting in the dark?
Can you email us? Can you email us these slides?
You would have to ask Willa that. They're the property of Dress for Success, so I'm not allowed to share
Okay.
that.
Yeah.
Okay, thank you.
I have one quick question.
Uh-huh.
I recently resigned from my last role,
Mhm.
and you just hit the nail on the head about everything. It wasn't a good fit, it was unethical, whatever, blase, blase. And I gave my employer 3 weeks notice. And I went to take like some time off that I had accumulated some time. And I took the time off thinking that that time was being, that I was granted the time, the 2 days that I was going to take off, which was some more time. And then I was told that you can't take time off because you are in process of resignation. So I had never heard of that before. And I thought that was odd that that was the case, and that I would be paid only my vacation time, not any other time that I had accumulated while I was working there.
So what's the question?
The question is that legal?
Well, typically companies don't pay out for personal time or sick time unless they have a stated policy around that.
Okay.
And companies, there is no, well, I shouldn't say there is no, there's certain states that do have certain laws, but typically a company will have a policy about their vacation payout. Either they have a policy that says we'll pay you out for everything that you've banked. They'll say, we have a no rollover policy past a certain number of hours, so we'll only pay you out up to 80 hours. Or they'll say, we're not paying you out for any of it. You know, if we're in a state where we can do that. So that should be in your employee handbook. You know, what I would go back to is you said, you know, I thought I could take the time. Well, that's not I was under the assumption either it was approved or not. So if it wasn't approved, then you had no right to take it. Right? So, you know,
Right. But I mean, it wasn't approved, and I wasn't told, and I didn't see that in my handbook either.
did you ask?
So I was reading my handbook.
Did you ask?
No, I did not.
There you go.
So
There you
it-
go.
so
If I were
that's
your
just-
HR person, that is what I would say to you.
Okay.
So, and again, you're okay, I hope I don't disconnect you all. Okay, good. It just stopped sharing the screen. So, you know, again, it's incumbent upon you to also do your work and do your diligence, right? So if you're not clear on what the policies are, ask what the policies are. If you're not clear on something's approved or not, ask what's not approved or not.
I'm trying to think. Wait a minute. I did ask something. Oh, when I asked about how would I be paid in regards to my vacation time, I would be paid for them. But like if I asked a question just per se about, I can't think of an example, but anything, things were not communicated effectively. So just a lie. It was just I left for a reason because it wasn't a good fit. So, and I didn't like how things were going. So it was best that I left. But moving forward, any other role, I know what to ask. I know what to do moving forward. So.
Okay.
Would it be okay to ask an employer once you've come to this to an agreement over the phone that it be put in writing so that you have it? So that this way there's no question about something later, because I've had an occasion where something was offered to me and it never happened. And it
Oh,
was-
absolutely. Absolutely. You know, companies will send you an offer letter. Typically it's PDF, but it doesn't matter. Everybody has Adobe. If you go through the negotiation process and you agree on different things that are not in the offer letter, you absolutely say, that's wonderful. Now that we've settled on X, Y, and Z, I can't wait to get the updated offer letter where that is included. And not only would I say
Right.
it,
And if
I
you,
would confirm it in email. I would email back the person I spoke to and say, so great talking with you. So excited to start this job. Can't wait to get the updated offer letter where we discussed that you would include XYZ
Mm.
in my offer.
Mm.
Absolutely. You never just assume that because they say yes, they're going to do it. Absolutely.
Mm.
What else?
Mm.
The other thing that happened to my husband's company is, unbeknownst to us, there's two different medical plans. So when, as a company progressed and changed, he's been with the company for a really long time, but I noticed that this is a new thing that's trending right now, where the company offers two different plans. One is maybe for someone who is younger, who doesn't, have, maybe has a, what would I say, a need as frequent. And then there's a second plan that is more for like people maybe after 45, 50, when we start to get the mammograms, the colonoscopies and whatnot. The cost there's a huge disparity in cost, and that's not explained, unfortunately. So we need to ask that, because they'll say, oh yeah, we have a medical benefit plan, but there's not a discussion about, there's no detail around that, right? So you find out later, that's what happened to me. I found out later that something wasn't offered, and I let go of one plan to then not really get a full coverage on everything.
Well,
So
that's why you ask for the benefit package
Benefit
before
package.
you negotiate, right?
Okay.
Because it's not illegal for a company to have different benefit packages, right? Like there may be, as long as the company defines who is entitled to what benefit package, it's not illegal. Certainly the corporate executives have a different benefit plan than the average Joe Schmo, right?
Right.
The middle management may have a different benefit plan than the field, let's say. Regardless of how many plans they have, they still have that plan package information. So they should be sending you the plan package based on the role you're in and what your role, fits into that bucket, so you can see what that will cost you and what is open to you.
Okay.
Anyway, thank you. It's very interesting, everything, and a lot to think about and be able to manage all those things.
Yeah, I mean, it just, to sum it up, it's just it's important to negotiate. And when you don't feel comfortable do it, you have to figure out a way to figure it out, right? So, if one of the things I did, and I'll tell this last story and then we can end for the night, but when I took a job, I was in a job already. I was comfortable paying my bills, blah, 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 just felt no growth there. And so I went out, this company actually found me on LinkedIn, reached out to me, blah, blah, went through 8,000 different interviews. They made an offer. The offer was 30% more than what I was making. Sounds good, right? I didn't expect that. Actually, it was 25%. So I was very happy with that. But because I do this, I'm not settling with it, right? I would have been happy to take that 25% and go party with my friends. I'm not settling. I said, that sounds great. You know what? It's Friday. Let me get back to you on Monday. Okay, does that sound good? Good. Okay, have a great weekend. Got off the phone because I knew when I heard that number, I was like, oh, that's good. I couldn't lean into oh, that's good. So over the weekend, I made my list of everything that was important to me, everything that I wanted in the priority of what was important. First priority, salary. So I went back to them and I said, okay, you're offering me this money. Would you increase it by 7,000? Well, I don't know. Let me look at the budget, blah, blah, blah. Okay, let me know. I'll get back to me when you know. Took 2 days. we can increase it by 5,000. Okay, good. That's awesome. And now I know that this position happened to be bonus eligible at 10% of my annual salary. And I said, I know that the financial fiscal year ends in 6 months, and that's when you pay out bonuses. I said, I will only be here for 6 months. I won't be able to prove that I deserve the bonus that you're offering. Are you willing to guarantee the full 10% bonus for the first year? Again, because I'm all about the money. I'm all about the money. I don't care about vacation. I never take vacation anyway. I'm all about the money. I said, well, are you willing to guarantee my bonus? Because see, working in HR, I know that if I didn't say anything about the bonus, at the bonus mark at the end of the fiscal year, they would have said, you're only been here for 6 months. We're going to give you 5%, not 10%, right? But I'm about the money. So I said, are you willing to guarantee that for the first year? Oh, we got to think about that. Okay. Let me know. I mean, I'm sure you have to talk to people. Let me know. They came back. Yes, we'll guarantee it for the first year. Okay, moving on. I said, with this job, there's a clothing allowance involved. Now I know how clothing allowances work. I said, but I want to make sure that I show up branded and wearing the product. And I know I get it. It doesn't sound like a lot, but the way they configure it is, I was getting $2,500 per each, $5,000 for the year. And I said, so, I want to show up branded, I want to build out my wardrobe. Would you be willing to double that for me for the first year? So it'd be 10,000 instead of 5,000. That she answered immediately. She said, sure, why not? Because again, they're not actually giving me the money. That is money that's credited towards you that you get product for on a taxation basis. So you're getting tax. The way this clothing allowance worked, I was paying tax on what 30% of the wholesale price of an item costs. So that's like nothing, right? So it's very easy to say yes to that. And I knew that because I work in HR. So I said, are you willing to double it? Yes, they were. Then I asked for, this company didn't have a tuition reimbursement program. I said, you're hiring me as the head of learning and development. I really feel strongly about building a corporate library. So are you willing to create a budget for me where I can start, subscriptions to certain magazines at the beginning, at least for the HR department, and then we'll grow it from there. Let's say $2,500 a year. They were like, well, that makes sense. It benefits the HR department. I had access to that. Of course, I was reading all the magazines. Nobody came in to read them. What else did I ask for that? Oh, then I asked for vacation. I didn't get the vacation. I knew I wouldn't, by the way, but I wanted to ask for something that I knew that they could turn down, right? Because I didn't want it to be gimme, 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 gimme. I asked them for something that I knew that they would turn down. And they did. And I was like, oh, okay. And I can't remember. There was something else I asked for that I got. And at that point, I'm like, I'm good. I'll take the job, right? So just because the first initial offer is good and you're happy with it, doesn't mean you can't get more. Because here's the inside skinny with HR. They're never going to offer you the maximum. Not out the gate, not the first offer. If they know that their budget is between 80 and 85, guarantee you they're going to offer you 83. Because they want that wiggle room to be the hero to say, you know what, we'll give you that extra $2,000. They never offer you the maximum. And so if you take what they offer you, you are leaving money on the table. If you think of nothing else, if you take what they offer you, you are leaving money on the table. Any other final questions? And geez, I went over 40 minutes. That never happens.
I
No, this was good though. We needed it. I mean, I know I needed it. This is a lot. This is good.
We're just, I think that the toughest part, and I'm going to mention this, that I think that what's happening to a lot of us, like I have all this experience, right? But I don't have a bachelor's degree. So now with this digital age, when you go on to their application process, you want to tell them, hey, I don't have a bachelor's, but I have all this experience. And I can't say that I've gotten any feedback on that. So
yeah,
and the hard part.
And I will say that a lot of these, I called these ATS systems, these applicant tracking systems, like the black hole of life, because they are configured in certain ways where it may pop up that, you know, for whatever reason, it'll kick candidates out that don't have a bachelor's degree or don't have a major in a certain field or whatever. That's why networking is critical. I have never gotten a job past in the last 20 years that I didn't get through knowing somebody. Never applied for a job in the last 20 years and got called in because my resume went through some black hole system and somebody plucked it out and called me. It's all about networking.
Who you know.
It absolutely is all about networking. You have, even if that means there's a company out there you want to work for, you don't know not one person in that company. You spend your lunch hour combing through LinkedIn, find somebody who's connected to somebody who's connected to somebody who's the neighbor of somebody, and you reach out to them and you keep reaching out to them. And finally, somebody is going to respond to you. And then when you start building those connections, you can reach out and say, look, I'm willing to apply online, but can you put that resume in front of the hiring manager, not HR? Not HR, and I'm an HR person telling you this. You don't put it in front of HR, you put it in front of the hiring manager. Because what happens is HR sees 200, 300, 8,000 resumes, right? The hiring manager may see 10. So what's going to happen is the hiring manager is going to see that resume, actually look at it and go, oh, this person doesn't look too bad. And then they're going to go to HR and go, can you screen this person for me? And HR is going to be mad. And they're going to go, dang it. But they're going to call you in because the hiring manager wants them to. That's why you send it to the hiring manager, not HR. Because HR is just going to come back to you and say, you need to apply online. We know where that ends up, right? Yeah. You got to get it in front of the hiring manager.
Okay.
And I'm HR and I'm telling you how to end run around us. I'm saying that's what works.
All right.
I always say it's who you know in the industry.
100%. Absolutely. My current
That's why
job
you leave the doors open.
yeah, I mean, my current job that I have now, my boss, who's the chief people officer, we met when I worked at Madison Square Garden, which is now almost 12 years ago. And I never worked for her. We just worked in the same HR department, but I never worked for her. She got this job January of last year, and she called me up and she said, I need you. And I know her, I've known her all these years. I know her integrity. I know her quality. I know her leadership excellence. I know all of that. And I said, what do you need me to do? And she said, I'll send you a job description. And I was like, okay. And I said, you do what you got to do. And she said, well, what are you looking for? I'm not sure what I can get you. And I was like, I know you, and I know you're going to do right by me. We never talked money. Never. We did not mention $1 amount. She sent me the offer letter. She did right by me. That's the level of, so, you know, I will walk through, I mean, first of all, she's a friend, right? But now she's also my boss. But I would walk through fire for her because she has that level of integrity. And then funny story, we get in, we find out the company crazy. She's like, oh, hell no, we all need to get more money. I was like, okay.
That's my kind of boss.
Yeah, exactly. But again, it's all about networking. I didn't even apply for the job. She was going around, well, maybe I should have you meet people. And then she was like, screw it, we got too much work to do. I don't have time for you to interview when I know I'm going to hire you anyway. You're hired. I was like, okay.
How can we find you on LinkedIn?
I realized that I'm using Dress for Success's Zoom and not my own. I was like, well, can't you see my name? No, you can't. It's not
No.
there. You can just look me up. My name is Deneen, D-E-N-E-E-N, last name Bennett, B-E-N-N-E-T-T.
Thank you.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, ladies, I'm going to let y'all get to bed. This has been great.
Thank you very,
Again,
a lot of great information.
Yeah, feel free to reach out to me on LinkedIn. You know, let's connect. If you have any other questions, I'd be happy to answer them for you.
Wonderful. Thank you so much.
All right. Y'all have a good
Have a good night.
evening.
Have a good night.
All right. Bye.